She gave birth in chains and was auctioned off minutes later with her newborn still crying in her arms. In a rain-drenched Texas cattle yard where women were traded like livestock, 19-year-old Marindale's life was worth exactly $200 to the silent rancher who bought her freedom. But when he whispered, "You owe me nothing," she didn't know whether to trust him or run. This is the story of a woman who was sold, a man who refused to own, and 3 children who taught them both what family truly means. Stay until the end and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The rain came down in sheets that night, turning the Texas cattle yard into a churning sea of mud and misery. Lightning split the sky in jagged white scars, illuminating the auction pens where women stood shivering behind iron bars, their eyes hollow, their hope long since drowned. The air reeked of wet earth, animal fear, and something darker, the stench of humanity stripped to its cruelest bones. Marindale didn't scream when the contractions began. She had learned long ago that screaming only brought more pain. She was 19 years old, though she felt ancient. Her body trembled on the rough plank table in the back corner of a livestock shed, her wrists still shackled to the wood with iron cuffs that had worn raw circles into her skin. The chains were just long enough to let her shift positions, but not long enough to reach her belly, to cradle the life that was tearing its way out of her with each agonizing wave. "Push, breeder," growled the overseer, a thick-necked man named Colt, who smelled of whiskey and tobacco. He didn't even look at her face. To him, she was inventory. "Get it out so we can clean you up for the block." Marin bit down on the leather strap they'd shoved between her teeth, her body arching as another contraction ripped through her. Sweat and rainwater mingled on her skin. Through the gaps in the wooden walls, she could see shadows moving, buyers inspecting the evening's merchandise, their voices low and calculating. She had been sold 3 times before. First at 14, when her father's debts caught up with him and he traded her to a land baron for forgiveness. Then at 16, passed to a cotton merchant who worked her fingers bloody. Then at 18, bought by a cattle dealer who discovered she was pregnant and decided she'd fetch a better price as a proven breeder. Each time, she'd lost a piece of herself. Each time, she'd promised herself she'd survive anyway. But this, giving birth in chains while rain hammered the tin roof and men gambled over cards in the next room, this was a new kind of hell. "Come on, girl," Colt muttered, finally glancing down at her with impatient eyes. "Baby's crowning, one more push." Marin squeezed her eyes shut and bore down with everything she had left. Pain exploded through her core, white-hot and blinding, and then a cry. Thin, furious, alive. The baby's first scream cut through the storm like a knife through canvas, and for one fragile moment, Marin forgot where she was, forgot the chains, forgot the auction block waiting outside. All that existed was that sound, her child, her blood, breathing. "It's a girl," Colt announced flatly, as if reporting the gender of a calf. He wrapped the baby hastily in a stained cloth and held her up to the lamplight, checking her limbs with rough efficiency. "Healthy enough. Good. She'll add value." "Give her to me," Marin gasped, her voice raw. "Please." Colt hesitated, then shrugged and placed the squirming bundle on Marin's chest. The baby was slick with birth, her face scrunched and red, her tiny fists waving blindly. Marin's shackled hands could barely reach, but she managed to touch her daughter's cheek, her fingers trembling. "Hey," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hey, little one. I'm here. Don't get attached," Colt interrupted, turning away to wash his hands in a bucket. "You're both going on the block in 10 minutes. Separate or together, depends on what brings more money." Marin's breath caught. No, you can't. I can do whatever I want, breeder. Your property, same as that baby. Now shut up before I gag you again." The baby rooted against Marin's chest, seeking warmth, seeking safety that didn't exist. Marin tried to curl around her, to shield her from the cold and the cruelty, but the chains pulled tight, biting into her wrists until blood welled up. Outside, the auction caller's voice boomed through the storm. "Next lot in 5 minutes. Fresh stock. Y'all ain't gonna want to miss this one." Marin closed her eyes, her lips moving in a silent prayer she wasn't sure she believed anymore. Let someone kind by us. Let someone... But kindness didn't live in cattle yards. She knew that. They dragged her to the auction block at midnight, still bleeding, her legs barely able to hold her weight. Colt unlocked one wrist from the table only to rechain both hands in front of her, then hauled her upright with a bruising grip on her arm. "Move," he ordered. Marin stumbled forward, clutching her baby to her chest with shackled hands. The rain had eased to a drizzle, but the mud was ankle-deep, sucking at her bare feet with each step. The auction yard was lit by torches that sputtered and smoked in the damp air, casting dancing shadows over the crowd of men gathered below the raised platform. 50, maybe 60 buyers, most of them drunk, all of them predatory. They laughed and elbowed each other as Marin was shoved up the wooden steps onto the block. The torchlight hit her full in the face, blinding her for a moment, and she swayed. "Steady, breeder," Colt hissed in her ear. "Smile. You want a good price, don't you?" She didn't answer, couldn't. Her throat had closed up with terror and exhaustion. The auction caller, a wiry man with a voice like gravel, stepped forward, raising his hands for attention. "All right, gentlemen, lot 17, 19-year-old female, healthy stock, proven fertile. Delivered a live girl not 30 minutes ago. Strong hips, good teeth, obedient disposition." Marin flinched as he grabbed her chin, forcing her mouth open to show her teeth like a horse. The crowd murmured appreciatively. "And as a bonus," the caller continued, gesturing to the baby in her arms, "we're offering the newborn as a package deal, or separate, if you prefer. Breeder and bleeder, fresh and ready." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Marin felt her stomach twist with nausea. "Starting bid, $100 for the pair. Do I hear 100? "100, a voice called from the back. "120, someone else shouted. "150. The bids climbed fast, the men's voices blending into a roar. Marin stared straight ahead, her vision tunneling, her arms tightening instinctively around her daughter. The baby had gone quiet, as if sensing the danger, her tiny body rigid against Marin's chest. "Run!" Marin's mind screamed. "Run! Run! Run!" But there was nowhere to go. The chains, the mud, the circle of men, there was no escape. 200! A voice barked, louder than the rest, and the crowd went silent. Marin's gaze snapped toward the sound. A man had stepped forward from the shadows at the edge of the yard, his broad-shouldered silhouette cutting a stark line against the torchlight. He wore a dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, obscuring his face, but his stance was solid, unmovable. The auction caller blinked. 200! Do I hear 220? Silence. The other buyers exchanged glances, muttering. 200 was high, too high for a girl still bleeding from childbirth, no matter how young and pretty. 200 going once, the caller announced. Twice. Marin held her breath. Sold! The gavel cracked like thunder. To the gentleman in the black coat, come settle up, sir. The crowd grumbled, disappointed, and began to disperse. Marin's legs buckled, and she sank to her knees on the platform, clutching her baby so tightly the infant finally whimpered. Colt grabbed her arm again, yanking her upright. Come on, your new owner's waiting. He dragged her down the steps and through the mud toward a small table where the buyer stood settling his payment with the auction clerk. Marin's heart pounded in her ears, drowning out the rain, the voices, everything. What kind of man pays $200 for a girl and a baby? The answer was always the same, the worst kind. When they reached the table, Colt shoved her forward. Here's your purchase, sir. 1 breeder, 1 infant, papers are in order. The man didn't respond immediately. He was counting out bills onto the table with slow, deliberate movements, rough hands, calloused and scarred. Marin couldn't see his face beneath the hat's brim, but she saw the set of his jaw, hard and unreadable. Finally, the clerk nodded. All here. She's yours. Colt unlocked Marin's shackles and tossed them aside with a metallic clatter. Pleasure doing business. Then he was gone, disappearing into the rain-soaked night, and Marin was left standing alone before her new owner, her wrists raw and bleeding, her baby silent in her arms. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the man turned toward her, and she got her first real look at his face. He was older than she'd expected, mid-30s maybe, with a weathered face carved by sun and hardship. His eyes were pale gray, sharp and guarded, but not cruel. Not yet. His expression gave away nothing. Can you walk? He asked. His voice was low, quiet, the kind of voice that didn't waste words. Marin nodded, though her legs were shaking. Good. He gestured toward a wagon parked at the edge of the yard. That's mine. Get in. She hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to run. But where? Into the storm? Into the mud? With a newborn in her arms? She had no choice. She walked. The wagon ride lasted an eternity, though it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. Marin sat on the hard wooden bench, her baby cradled against her chest, her body swaying with every jolt and rut in the muddy road. The man, her new owner, sat beside her in silence, his hands steady on the reins, his eyes fixed ahead. Marin didn't dare speak. She'd learned that silence was safer, but questions screamed in her mind. What does he want? Why did he buy me? What happens when we get wherever we're going? The wagon finally slowed, turning off the main road onto a narrow, rutted path that wound through tall pines. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick with the smell of wet earth and wood smoke. Through the trees, Marin glimpsed a small cabin, weathered logs, a stone chimney, a single window glowing with lamplight. The man pulled the wagon to a stop and climbed down without a word. Then he turned, holding out a hand to help her. Marin stared at his hand like it might bite. "You're bleeding," he said quietly. "You need to lie down." Still, she didn't move. He exhaled, dropped his hand, and stepped back. "I'm not going to hurt you. Why should I believe you?" Her voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. His pale eyes held hers for a beat. Then he said, "You don't have to, but you'll bleed out in that wagon if you don't let me help." He was right. She could feel the wetness between her thighs, the dizziness creeping in at the edges. Reluctantly, she took his hand, rough, warm, steady, and let him help her down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet hit the ground, but he caught her elbow, steadying her without pulling her close. "Inside," he said. She followed him into the cabin, her heart hammering. The interior was small but clean, one room with a bed in the corner, a wood stove crackling softly, a table, and 2 chairs. The air smelled of pine and coffee. The man gestured toward the bed. "Lie down. I'll get water and cloth." "Why?" Marin blurted, her voice breaking. "What do you want from me?" He paused, his back to her, then turned slowly. His expression was unreadable, but something flickered in his eyes, something almost like sadness. "Nothing," he said quietly. "Just rest." And then he walked out, leaving her alone in the lamplight with her baby and a bed that felt impossibly soft after years of hard ground. Marin didn't know whether to cry or scream, so she did neither. She lay down. She woke to the sound of water trickling and the smell of herbs, sharp, medicinal, oddly soothing. Her body ached everywhere, a deep bone weariness that made even breathing feel like effort. For a disorienting moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back, the auction, the chains, the man in the black coat, her baby. Marin's eyes snapped open, and she bolted upright, too fast, her head spinning. She clutched at the blanket covering her, her gaze darting around the cabin in a panic. "Easy!" The man's voice came from across the room. He was sitting at the table, a steaming cup in front of him, his hat off now, revealing dark hair streaked with early gray. "She's right here." Marin's gaze followed his gesture to a small wooden cradle beside the bed, a cradle that hadn't been there before. Inside, wrapped in a clean white blanket, her daughter slept soundly, her tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Relief hit Marin so hard she nearly sobbed. Did you? "I cleaned her up," the man said evenly. "Fed her some goat's milk with a cloth. She took it fine. You've been asleep for 4 hours." Marin's throat tightened. She looked down at herself and realized she was wearing a clean nightgown, rough cotton, oversized but clean. Her wounds had been bandaged. The blood was gone. "Who are you?" she whispered. The man took a slow sip of his coffee, considering the question. Finally, he said, "Hale Murdoch. I own a ranch about 10 miles north of here. I raise cattle, keep to myself, don't bother nobody." "Why did you buy me?" "Because nobody else should have." Marin blinked, thrown by the bluntness of the answer. "That's not—" "What do you mean?" Hale set his cup down and leaned back in his chair, his pale eyes steady on hers. "I've seen that auction yard before. I know what happens to the women who get sold there. Figured you deserved better. You don't even know me." "Don't need to." He stood, crossing to the stove to pour more coffee. You want some? It's strong, but it'll help. Marin didn't answer. Her mind was spinning, trying to make sense of this, of him. Men didn't just help. Men took. Men used. Men broke. That's all she'd ever known. Hale poured a second cup anyway and set it on the small table beside the bed. Drink it or don't. Either way, you need to eat something. I'll make bread and eggs. He moved to the stove, pulling out a cast iron skillet, and started cracking eggs with an efficiency that spoke of long practice. Marin watched him warily, her hands trembling as she picked up the coffee cup. It was bitter, scalding hot, and the best thing she'd tasted in months. I don't understand, she said finally, her voice breaking. Why are you being kind to me? Hale didn't look up from the skillet. Ain't kindness. It's just human. Most humans aren't. I know. He flipped the eggs with a practiced flick of his wrist. Doesn't mean I have to be like them. Marin's hands tightened around the cup. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. But belief was dangerous. Belief got you hurt. What happens now? She asked quietly. Hale slid the eggs onto a plate, added a thick slice of bread, and brought it over to her. Now you eat. Then you rest. Then when you're strong enough, we'll figure out what comes next. And if I want to leave? He met her eyes without flinching. Then I'll take you wherever you want to go. Marin stared at him, searching for the lie, the trap, the cruelty, hiding beneath the calm. But all she saw was a tired man with scars on his hands and shadows in his eyes. Someone who understood pain because he'd lived it. Why? She whispered. Hale was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Because I had a sister once. She got sold when I was too young to stop it. I never saw her again. His jaw tightened. I can't save her, but I can save you. Ooh. Marin's breath hitched. Tears burned her eyes, and she looked away, blinking hard. Eat, Hale said quietly, turning back to the stove. Your baby needs you strong. So Marin ate, and for the first time in 5 years, she didn't taste fear with every bite. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of healing and caution. Hale gave Marin the bed. He slept on a bedroll by the stove. He cooked simple meals, eggs, bread, venison stew, and left them within reach without hovering. He built a better cradle for the baby, carving the wood smooth so there were no splinters, and lined it with soft wool blankets. He never touched Marin without asking first. He never raised his voice. He never locked the door. And slowly, impossibly, Marin began to breathe again. Her body healed faster than her mind. The bleeding stopped. Her strength returned. But every time Hale moved too quickly or spoke too loudly, she flinched. Every time he reached for something near her, she braced for a blow that never came. He noticed. Of course he noticed. One evening, as they sat across from each other at the small table eating supper, Hale set down his fork and said, You got a name for her yet? Marin glanced at the cradle where her daughter slept peacefully. I haven't decided. Take your time. Names matter. What was your sister's name? Hale's jaw tightened. Eliza. She was 12 when they took her. I'm sorry. Me too. He picked up his fork again, his voice careful. What's yours? My what? Your name. Marin hesitated. She'd been called so many things over the years, breeder, girl, property, that her real name felt foreign, like something that belonged to someone else. Marin, she said finally. Marin Dale. Marin, Hale repeated, as if testing the weight of it. Then he nodded. Good name. Strong. Something loosened in Marin's chest, just a fraction. What do I call you? She asked. Hale's fine. Not sir, not master. His pale eyes darkened. I'm not your master, Marin. I never will be. Then what am I to you? Hale was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady. You're a person who deserves a chance to decide what happens next, that's all. Marin looked down at her plate, her throat tight. She wanted to believe him. She was starting to believe him, but trust was a muscle she'd forgotten how to use. A week after Marin arrived, a storm rolled in, a real one this time, all thunder and wind and rain that hammered the cabin's roof like fists. The baby woke crying, startled by the noise, and Marin scooped her up, rocking her gently. "Shh, shh, you're safe," she murmured, though her own heart was racing. Hale was at the stove, brewing tea. He glanced over. "She hungry?" "I think she's just scared." "Can't blame her." He poured 2 cups and brought one over, setting it carefully on the table beside Marin. "Storm like this, I'd be scared too." Marin cradled her daughter close, swaying slightly. The baby's cries softened to hiccups, then finally silence. Her tiny fist curled around Marin's finger, holding tight. "You're good with her," Hale observed. "I don't know what I'm doing." "Nobody does at first. You'll figure it out." Marin looked up at him, this strange, quiet man who'd bought her freedom and asked for nothing in return. "Why do you live out here alone?" Hale took a sip of his tea, considering. "Tried living in town once. Didn't take. Too many people, too much noise. Out here it's quiet. Peaceful. Lonely. Sometimes." He met her eyes, but loneliness is better than cruelty. Marin understood that in her bones. Thunder cracked overhead, and she flinched despite herself. The baby stirred but didn't wake. "You're safe here," Hale said quietly. "I know you don't believe that yet, but you will." Marin wanted to argue, to tell him that nowhere was safe, that safety was a lie people told themselves, but the words wouldn't come. Because maybe, just maybe, he was right. Wholesome. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Marin grew stronger, her body knitting itself back together, her daughter thriving on goat's milk and Marin's tentative care. Hale taught her how to use the wood stove, how to make bread, how to mend clothes. He was patient, never condescending, never impatient when she struggled. And slowly, Marin stopped flinching when he walked past. One morning, as she sat outside the cabin watching her daughter sleep in the cradle, Hale approached carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth. "Got something for you?" he said. Marin looked up warily. "What is it?" He unwrapped the cloth, revealing a simple dress, dark blue cotton, plain but clean and whole. "Figured you'd want something that fits. Made it myself. Might be a little big, but it'll do." Marin stared at the dress, her throat closing up. It was the first new thing anyone had given her in years. Thank you," she managed. Hale nodded and set the dress on the porch railing. "There's no debt, Marin. You don't owe me anything." "Then why?" "Because you're a person," he said simply. "And people deserve to have things that are theirs." He walked back toward the barn, leaving her alone with the dress and the baby and a feeling she couldn't quite name. Hope, maybe. Or something close to it. That night, Marin put on the dress. It was too big in the shoulders and too long in the hem, but it was clean and whole, and hers. She stood in front of the small, cracked mirror Hale kept above the wash basin and barely recognized herself. She looked human again. When Hale came in from feeding the horses, he paused, then nodded approvingly. "Suits you." "It's perfect," Marin said quietly. "Thank you." "You already said that." "I know, but I mean it." Hale's expression softened just for a moment. "You're welcome." They ate supper in companionable silence. Venison stew and bread, the cabin warm and dry. The baby slept soundly in her cradle, content and safe. For the first time in 5 years, Marin felt something other than fear settle in her chest. She felt home. And it terrified her, because homes could be taken away. Safety could be shattered. Kindness could turn cruel. She'd learned that lesson over and over. But as she glanced at Hale across the table, this quiet, damaged man who'd bought her freedom and asked for nothing, she thought, maybe not this time. Maybe this time is different. She didn't say it out loud, but she let herself think it. And that was a start. But the 4th week brought an unexpected visitor. Marin was outside hanging laundry on the line Hale had strung between 2 pines when she heard the sound of hooves on the dirt path. Her whole body went rigid, her hands freezing mid-motion. Hale emerged from the barn, his expression instantly alert. "Get inside," he said quietly. "Who is it?" "Don't know, but get inside anyway." Marin grabbed the baby from the cradle on the porch and hurried into the cabin, her heart pounding. Through the window, she watched as a man on horseback emerged from the trees, older, well-dressed, with a silver watch chain glinting at his vest. A buyer. She knew the type instantly. Hale met him in the yard, his stance easy, but his hand resting casually near the rifle propped against the barn door. "Help you with something?" Hale called. The man dismounted, smiling in that oily way rich men did when they wanted something. "Afternoon, friend. Name's Clayton Webb. I'm looking for a girl, young, dark hair, had a baby recently. Heard she might have ended up out this way." Marin's blood turned to ice. Hale's expression didn't change. "Don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." Webb's smile widened. "You bought her at the Cartwright auction 3 weeks back, $200, if memory serves. And if I did? Then she's rightfully mine. I had a prior contract with the seller, legal and binding. Your purchase was invalid." Marin watched through the window, her arms tightening around her baby, her mind screaming, "No, no, no, no." Hale tilted his head slightly. "You got paperwork to prove that." Webb reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document, waving it. "Right here. Signed and notarized. Now I'm a reasonable man. I'll pay you back your $200 and take the girl off your hands. No hard feelings." Hale studied him for a long moment. Then he said, "How much you want for that contract?" Webb blinked. "Excuse me? The contract, how much?" "It's not for sale." "Everything's for sale, Mr. Webb. You taught me that." Hale pulled a folded stack of bills from his pocket. $400. That's double what you'd have paid originally. Take it and go." Webb's eyes narrowed. "Why would you do that?" "Because I don't like you." A tense silence stretched between them. Finally, Webb snatched the money, counted it, and shoved it into his coat. "You're a fool, Murdoch. That girl's nothing but trouble." "Then you should be glad to be rid of her." Webb mounted his horse, sneering. "Enjoy your trouble." He rode off, and Hale stood watching until the sound of hooves faded completely. Then he turned and walked back to the cabin. Marin met him at the door, shaking, tears streaming down her face. You paid." "It's done," Hale said quietly. "You're free, legally this time." Marin tried to speak, but no words came. Instead, she collapsed forward, and Hale caught her gently, carefully, holding her as she finally broke. "You're safe," he murmured into her hair. "I promise, you're safe." And for the first time, Marin believed him. Marin cried until she had nothing left, her body shaking against Hale's chest, while he held her with steady, careful hands. When the sobs finally subsided into shuddering breaths, she pulled back, wiping her face with trembling fingers. "I'm sorry," she whispered hoarsely. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize for being human," Hale said quietly. He stepped back, giving her space, his pale eyes soft. "You've earned the right to fall apart." Marin clutched her baby closer, the infant still sleeping peacefully, despite the storm of emotion swirling around her. $400, that's more than most people see in a year. It's just money. It's not just anything. She looked up at him, her vision still blurred with tears. "Why would you do that for me?" Hale was silent for a moment, his jaw working as if choosing his words carefully. Finally he said, "Because everyone deserves to own their own life. And because I meant what I said, you don't owe me anything. Not gratitude, not loyalty, not a damn thing. You're free, Marin, truly free." The word felt foreign on her tongue, like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. Free. She'd heard it before, dreamed of it in the dark hours before dawn, but never believed she'd actually taste it. "What do I do now?" The question came out small, lost. "Whatever you want." Hale moved to the stove, pouring water into the kettle. "You can stay here as long as you need, or I can take you to town, help you find work, find a place of your own. Your choice." "I don't know how to choose." "Then don't. Not yet. Just rest. The rest will come." Marin sank into the chair by the table, exhaustion washing over her in waves. The baby stirred in her arms, making soft mewling sounds, and Marin automatically began to rock her, the motion as natural as breathing now. "What if more men come?" she asked quietly. "What if someone else has a contract, or a claim, or—" Then I'll handle it. Hale's voice was firm, certain. I'll handle all of it. You just focus on healing. Healing. Such a simple word for such an impossible task. But as Marin sat in the warm cabin, listening to the kettle begin to whistle and her daughter's soft breathing, she thought maybe, just maybe, it wasn't completely impossible after all. The days that followed felt suspended somehow, caught between the terror of what had been and the uncertainty of what could be. Marin moved through them carefully, testing the boundaries of her new reality like someone walking on ice, waiting for it to crack beneath her feet. But it held. Hale went about his work with quiet efficiency, tending the cattle, mending fences, chopping wood, never demanding anything of her, never expecting her to perform or please or prove her worth. Sometimes he'd come back in the evening with wildflowers tucked into his shirt pocket and set them in a jar on the table without comment. Sometimes he'd carve small wooden animals by the fire while she nursed the baby, his knife moving with practiced ease, shavings curling onto the floor. You never talk about yourself, Marin observed one evening, watching his hands work. About your life before. Hale didn't look up from the piece of wood taking shape in his palm, a small horse, delicate and perfect. Not much to tell. That's not true. Everyone has a story. Some stories aren't worth repeating. He blew sawdust from the carving, examining it critically. What do you want to know? Marin considered. Why ranching? Why out here alone? My father was a rancher, taught me the trade before he died. As for alone, he paused, his jaw tightening. I was married once. She died giving birth. Baby didn't make it either. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Marin's breath caught. Hale, I'm so... It was 8 years ago. He set down the carving and finally met her eyes. I buried them both under the oak tree out back. Tried to keep going, but the house felt too empty, too full of ghosts. So I sold it, bought this land, built this cabin. Started over. I'm sorry, Marin whispered. Me too. He picked up the wooden horse again, running his thumb over its smooth surface. But pain doesn't kill you. It just changes you. You learn to carry it. Marin understood that more than he knew. Is that why you bought me? Because of her? Partly. Hale turned the carving over in his hands, but mostly because I've seen too much suffering in this world. Figured I could prevent a little more of it, even if it was just for one person. You did more than prevent it. You gave me hope. Hale's expression softened. Then I'm glad. He stood, crossing to the cradle where the baby slept, and placed the carved horse on the blanket beside her. For when she's older, Marin's throat tightened. You're too good. I'm not good. I'm just tired of being cruel. That night, after Hale had settled into his bedroll by the stove, Marin lay awake staring at the ceiling, her daughter warm against her side. She thought about Hale's words, about his wife and baby buried under the oak tree, about the way he'd carved that tiny horse with such tender care. He was broken too, just in different ways, and somehow that made her feel less alone. 3 weeks after Clayton Webb's visit, Marin woke to the sound of crying, but not her baby's. The sound was coming from outside, thin and desperate and wrong. She bolted upright, her heart hammering, and looked toward Hale's bedroll. Empty. Dawn light filtered through the window, painting everything gray. The crying came again, closer now. Marin wrapped herself in a shawl and moved to the door, opening it cautiously. The morning air was crisp, smelling of pine and dew. At first she saw nothing unusual, just the yard, the barn, the trees beyond. Then she spotted it. A small figure huddled on the porch steps, shaking violently. A child. A little girl, no more than 3 years old, dressed in a filthy, torn dress, her dark hair matted with dirt and leaves. She was crying so hard she was nearly choking on the sobs. Oh my God! Marin rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside the child. Sweetheart, what happened? Where did you come from? The little girl looked up with huge, terrified brown eyes, her face streaked with tears and grime. She didn't answer, just kept crying, her small body trembling. Marin reached for her, and the child flinched violently, scrambling backward. It's okay, Marin said softly, keeping her hands visible, her voice gentle. I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe now. The girl stared at her, chest heaving, and then lunged forward, wrapping her tiny arms around Marin's neck with desperate strength. She buried her face against Marin's shoulder and wailed. Marin held her, rocking slowly, her own eyes stinging with tears. Shh, shh, you're okay. I've got you. What in God's name? Hale's voice came from behind them, rough with alarm. He'd been in the barn and came running at the sound. Where did she come from? I don't know, she was just here. Hale crouched beside them, his expression tight with concern. Hey, little one, can you tell us your name? The girl just cried harder. Marin noticed something then, a piece of paper pinned to the child's dress, half hidden by her tangled hair. With trembling fingers, she unpinned it and unfolded it. The note was brief, scrawled in barely legible handwriting. Her name is Wren. I can't keep her. Please take care of her. I'm sorry. No signature, no explanation, just those few desperate words. Jesus, Hale muttered, reading over Marin's shoulder. Someone just left her here. Like garbage, Marin whispered, anger and heartbreak warring in her chest. Like she was nothing. We need to get her inside, check her for injuries. Marin stood carefully, lifting the little girl with her. Wren clung to her like a drowning person to driftwood, her cries softening to hiccuping whimpers. Inside the cabin, Marin sat in the chair by the table, keeping Wren in her lap while Hale brought warm water and cloth. Let me see you, sweetheart, Marin said gently, trying to ease the child back to look at her. I need to make sure you're not hurt. Wren resisted at first, then slowly allowed Marin to examine her. She was painfully thin, her ribs visible beneath the tattered dress, her skin marked with old bruises in various stages of healing. Her feet were bare and cut, as if she'd walked a long distance over rough ground. She's malnourished, Marin said, her voice shaking, and someone's been hurting her. Hale's jaw clenched so tight, Marin heard his teeth grind. I'll ride into town, ask around, see if anyone knows. No. The word came out harder than Marin intended. Don't. Marin, we have to eat. We have to what? Find whoever did this to her so they can do it again? Marin looked down at Wren, who had gone very still and quiet in her arms, watching them with those huge, haunted eyes. She's terrified, Hale. She's been abandoned and abused and left to die. If we take her back to town, they'll just put her in an orphanage or sell her off like they sold me. Hale was silent, his expression warring between reason and emotion. She needs us, Marin continued, her voice breaking. She needs someone to keep her safe, to choose her. You want to keep her? I don't know what I want. I just know I can't let her go back to whatever hell she came from. Hale studied her for a long moment, then looked at Wren. The little girl stared back at him, her expression wary but not quite as terrified as before. Slowly, carefully, Hale reached out and touched her hair, smoothing it back from her face. Okay, he said quietly. We keep her. Relief flooded through Marin so powerfully she nearly sobbed. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We don't know what we're doing. Neither do most parents. Marin adjusted Wren in her lap, meeting the child's eyes. Your name is Wren? The girl nodded, just barely. That's a beautiful name. My name is Marin, and this is Hale. You're safe now, Wren. Do you understand? You're safe. Wren didn't speak, but something in her expression shifted, the tiniest loosening of the terror that had been holding her rigid. Hale fetched bread and milk, and they coaxed Wren into eating a few small bites, though she was clearly too frightened and overwhelmed to manage much. Afterward, Marin bathed her gently in the wash basin, cleaning away layers of dirt and fear, dressing her in one of the baby's larger swaddling cloths fashioned into a makeshift dress. Wren submitted to all of it in silence, her eyes never leaving Marin's face. Can you tell me how old you are? Marin asked softly as she combed the tangles from Wren's hair. Wren held up 3 fingers. 3 years old, and where did you come from, sweetheart? Wren pointed vaguely toward the woods, then buried her face in Marin's shoulder again. It's okay. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. That night, Marin made a small bed for Wren on the floor beside her own, using blankets and the softest cloth she could find. But when she tried to lay the child down, Wren clung to her with renewed desperation, crying again. Mama, she whimpered. Mama, don't leave. Marin's heart cracked wide open. I'm not your mama, sweetheart. Mama. Wren's fingers twisted in Marin's dress. Please. Mama. Marin looked helplessly at Hale, who was watching from across the room with an expression she couldn't quite read. Let her sleep with you, he said quietly. She needs to feel safe. So Marin climbed into bed with both children, her infant daughter on one side, this broken, terrified little girl on the other, and held them both while they slept. Wren's small hand gripped Marin's nightgown so tightly her knuckles went white, even in sleep. I don't know what I'm doing, Marin whispered into the darkness. Hale's voice came soft from his bedroll. Yes, you do. You're doing exactly what she needs. Marin closed her eyes, tears slipping down her temples. 2 children now, 2 lives depending on her, trusting her, calling her mama. She'd been property herself just weeks ago. How was she supposed to protect anyone? But as Wren's grip slowly loosened in sleep, her breathing evening out, Marin thought maybe the question wasn't how. Maybe it was simply, will you try? And the answer to that was easy. Yes. Always yes. The adjustment period was harder than Marin expected. Wren barely spoke, communicating mostly through gestures and tears. She startled at loud noises, flinched when anyone moved too quickly, and woke screaming from nightmares several times a night. She refused to be more than a few feet from Marin, following her everywhere with silent, desperate attachment. She's been through something terrible, Hale observed one afternoon as they watched Wren huddle in the corner, clutching the wooden horse he'd carved. Might take months before she feels safe. I know. Marin was nursing the baby, exhaustion pulling at every muscle. I just wish I could make it better faster. Time's the only thing that heals trauma, that and consistency. You sound like you know from experience. Hale's expression darkened. After my wife died, I couldn't sleep for 6 months. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her screaming. Took a long time to learn how to live with it. How did you? Kept getting up every morning, kept doing the work. Eventually the weight got lighter. He glanced at Wren. She'll get there. Just have to keep showing up. Showing up. That at least Marin knew how to do. She began establishing routines, small predictable rhythms that Wren could rely on. Breakfast at dawn. A walk around the property mid-morning. Quiet time in the afternoon while the baby napped. Supper at sunset. Stories by firelight before bed. Nothing complicated, but consistent. Slowly, impossibly slowly, Wren began to thaw. The first time she smiled, a tiny, tentative thing directed at Hale when he showed her how to feed the chickens, Marin nearly cried with relief. The first time she spoke a full sentence, "Can I hold the baby?" Marin actually did cry. You're doing good, Hale told her that night after both children were asleep. She's starting to trust you. I'm terrified I'll do something wrong. Say something that reminds her of whatever happened before. You will. Everyone does. But that's not what matters. What matters is that you keep trying anyway. Marin looked at him across the dim cabin. This man who'd become her anchor without ever asking to be. Why are you so patient with all of this? With me. With them. Because I know what it's like to be broken. Hale's voice was quiet, honest. And I know how rare it is to find someone who doesn't demand you be whole right away. Is that what I am to you? Broken? No? He met her eyes steadily. You're healing. There's a difference. The distinction felt important, though Marin couldn't quite articulate why. She nodded slowly, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Thank you. For everything. Don't. Hale held up a hand. We're past thank yous. We're just family now. That's all. Family. The word settled over Marin like a blanket, warm and unfamiliar and absolutely terrifying, but also right. 6 weeks after Wren arrived, Marin was hanging laundry when she heard laughter, high and bright and completely unexpected. She turned to see Wren chasing a butterfly through the wildflowers behind the cabin, her face lit with pure, uncomplicated joy. Hale stood watching from the barn door, a rare smile softening his weathered features. When he caught Marin's eye, he nodded. See? Healing. That night, as they sat around the table eating venison stew, Wren suddenly looked up at Hale and said, Are you my papa? Silence fell like a stone. Hale's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. Marin held her breath, unsure what he'd say, afraid he'd crush this fragile hope blooming in Wren's eyes. Finally, Hale set down his spoon and leaned forward, his expression gentle but serious. "Would you want me to be?" Wren nodded vigorously. "Then yes," Hale said quietly. "I can be your papa, if that's what you want. And Marin's my mama? If she says yes." Two pairs of eyes turned to Marin, waiting. The baby made a soft cooing sound from her cradle, as if weighing in on the matter. Marin's throat was so tight she could barely speak. "Yes," she managed. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm your mama." Wren's whole face lit up, and she scrambled out of her chair to throw her arms around Marin's neck. "Mama," she whispered, the word full of wonder and relief and desperate hope. "Mama, mama, mama." Marin held her, tears streaming freely now, and looked over Wren's head at Hale. He was watching them with an expression so tender it made her heart ache. This is family, she thought. This is what it's supposed to feel like. Not blood, not obligation, just choice and staying. The weeks turned into months, summer bleeding into autumn, the trees around the cabin blazing gold and red. Wren grew bolder, her laughter more frequent, her nightmares less consuming. She learned to help Maureen with simple chores, to gather eggs and pull weeds and sing nonsense songs to the baby. She started calling Hale Papa without hesitation, and he answered every time with steady patience. Marin found herself settling into this life like someone trying on clothes that fit better than expected. She learned to bake bread that didn't burn, to mend shirts with reasonably straight stitches, to predict when the baby would wake and when Wren needed quiet time. She learned the sound of Hale's footsteps coming up the path, the way he hummed tunelessly while he worked, the slight softening of his eyes when he looked at the children. She learned what home felt like, but peace was fragile and fear had deep roots. One cold October morning, Marin woke to find Wren gone. The space beside her in bed was empty, the blankets thrown back. Panic seized her instantly. "Wren?" She bolted upright, scanning the cabin. "Wren!" Hale was already up, pulling on his boots. "She's not inside?" "No. Oh God, what if someone took her? What if—" "We'll find her." Hale grabbed his coat. "You check the barn. I'll check the woods." They found her 20 minutes later, curled under the oak tree behind the cabin, the one where Hale's wife and baby were buried. She was sobbing, her small body racked with shaking, clutching something in her hands. Marin ran to her, dropping to her knees in the wet grass. "Wren, baby, what's wrong? What happened?" Wren held out her hands, revealing a small bird, dead, its neck broken, its feathers ruffled. "I found it," she choked out. "It was hurt, and I tried to help, but it died, and it's all my fault, and, oh, sweetheart, no." Marin gathered her close, bird and all. "It's not your fault. Sometimes things die. It's not because you did anything wrong. But I touched it, and then it stopped moving." "That's not how it works. The bird was already dying. You tried to be kind. That's what matters." Wren cried harder, and Marin held her, rocking slightly. Hale crouched beside them, his hand gentle on Wren's back. "You know what we do when something dies?" he said quietly. "We bury it. Give it a place to rest. Would you like to do that for the bird?" Wren nodded, hiccuping. Together, the three of them dug a small hole beneath the oak tree, wrapped the bird in soft leaves, and laid it to rest. Wren placed a small stone on top, marking the spot. "Can we say a prayer?" she whispered. Marin and Hale exchanged glances. Neither of them were particularly religious, but Marin nodded. "What would you like to say?" Wren closed her eyes, her hands clasped. "Thank you for flying. I'm sorry you got hurt. I hope wherever you are now, there's lots of sky." It was the most perfect prayer Marin had ever heard. Afterward, as they walked back to the cabin, Wren slipped her hand into Hale's. "Papa?" "Yeah, little one? Are you going to die?" Hale stopped walking, his jaw tightening. He knelt down to Wren's level, meeting her eyes seriously. "Someday, yes. Everyone does eventually, but not today. Not for a long, long time. Promise?" "I promise to do my best to stay." "And Mama? And the baby?" "Same promise." He touched her cheek gently. "We're not going anywhere, Wren. We're staying right here with you." Wren studied his face intently, as if memorizing it, then nodded. Okay, I'm staying too. Good, Hale said softly. That's real good. That afternoon, while the children napped, Marin sat on the porch steps staring at the mountains in the distance. Hale joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand, and they sat in comfortable silence for a long time. She asked me if I'm staying, Marin said finally. A few days ago. She wanted to know if I'm going to leave like whoever left her. What did you tell her? That I'm staying, but I don't know if she believes me. Marin wrapped her hands around the warm cup. I don't know if I even believe me. Why wouldn't you? Because everything I've ever had gets taken away. The words came out flat, matter of fact. My father sold me. My owners traded me. My freedom was bought and sold 4 times before you. I've learned not to count on anything lasting. Hale was quiet for a moment, then said, I can't promise you nothing bad will ever happen again. Life doesn't work that way. But I can promise I'm not leaving, and I'm not selling, and this, he gestured to the cabin, the land, the life they'd built, is yours for as long as you want it. What if I break it? Marin's voice cracked. What if I'm not strong enough to… You are. Hale turned to face her fully. You've survived things that would have killed most people. You've taken 2 broken children and given them hope. You're the strongest person I know, Marin. You just don't see it yet. Tears burned her eyes, but she blinked them back. I'm scared. Me too. He smiled faintly. But we're scared together. That counts for something. Marin nodded, not trusting her voice, and they sat watching the sun sink lower, painting the sky gold and pink. Your daughter needs a name, Hale said after a while. She's 3 months old now. Marin had been avoiding this, afraid that naming her would make her too real, too precious, too easy to lose. But Hale was right. What would you name her? She asked. Not my place. She's yours. She's ours. The word felt bold, dangerous. All of this is ours, so help me. Hale considered. Something strong. Something that means hope. Marin thought about the baby's fierce grip, her healthy lungs, her relentless determination to live despite being born in chains. Dawn, she said finally, because she was born at the end of my darkest night. Dawn Dale. Hale tested the name. I like it. Dawn Murdoch, Marin corrected quietly, and watched surprise flicker across his face. You sure about that? We're family, aren't we? She should have your name too. Hale's throat worked, emotion crossing his features too fast to name. Finally he nodded. Dawn Murdoch it is. That night, Marin whispered the name to her daughter for the first time, and the baby cooed as if in approval. Wren, who had been listening from her spot on the floor, sat up. She has a name now? Yes, Dawn. That's pretty. Wren crawled over to peek into the cradle. Hi, Dawn. I'm your big sister. Dawn grabbed Wren's finger, holding tight, and Wren giggled with delight. Watching them, Marin felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of the fear that had lived there so long she'd forgotten it wasn't part of her. She glanced at Hale, who was watching the girls with an expression of fierce tenderness. Thank you, she said softly, for giving me this. I didn't give you anything. You made this yourself. We made it. Marin stood, crossing to where he sat. Together. Hale looked up at her, and for a long moment, something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, understanding, the acknowledgement of something growing that neither had named yet. Then Wren called out, Mama, Papa, come see, Dawn's smiling. And the moment passed, folded back into the ordinary rhythm of their extraordinary life. But it stayed with Marin as she settled the children for sleep, as she cleaned the supper dishes, as she finally lay down in the bed that no longer felt like someone else's. It stayed with her like a promise she was finally ready to believe. Maybe this time, home would last. The first snow came early that year, dusting the pine trees white and turning the world into something clean and quiet. Marin stood at the window watching Wren make footprints in the fresh powder, her laughter carrying clear through the cold air. Dawn was asleep in her cradle, finally, after a fussy morning that had left Marin exhausted and frayed. She didn't hear the horse until it was already in the yard. Her whole body went rigid, that old familiar terror flooding her veins like ice water. Through the window, she saw a man dismounting, well-dressed, expensive coat, the kind of man who owned things and people with equal ease. "Hale!" Her voice came out sharp with panic. He was beside her in seconds, his hand going automatically to the rifle above the door. "Stay inside with the girls." "Who is it?" "Don't know yet." His jaw was set hard. "But I'll handle it." Marin watched as Hale stepped out onto the porch, the rifle held loose but ready. The stranger was older, maybe 50, with silver hair and a face that spoke of wealth and power. He smiled as Hale approached, but it was the smile of a predator. "Good morning," the man called out, his voice smooth as honey. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "State your business," Hale said flatly. "My name is Frederick Ashton. I'm a businessman from Dallas. I've come about the girl." Marin's blood turned to ice. Her hand started shaking so badly she had to grip the windowsill. "What girl?" Hale's voice was deadly calm. "Don't play games, Mr. Murdoch. The one you purchased from the Cartwright auction. Marin Dale. I have a legal contract for her services, dated and notarized 3 months prior to your purchase." He pulled papers from his coat pocket. "Your transaction was invalid. She's rightfully mine." "We already went through this with Webb," Hale said. "I paid him off. She's free." "Webb didn't have the authority to sell that contract. He was merely a middleman. The actual contract belongs to me, and I'm here to collect my property." Hale's grip tightened on the rifle. "She's not property." "Legally, she is. And if you don't hand her over, I'll have the sheriff here by sundown." Ashton's smile widened. "You seem like a reasonable man, Mr. Murdoch. I'm prepared to compensate you for your trouble. $500. That's more than fair." Inside, Marin couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. Not again. Not when she'd finally found something that felt like safety, like home. She looked at Dawn sleeping peacefully, at Wren playing in the snow, and felt her world starting to crack apart. "How much?" Hale's voice cut through her panic. "I beg your pardon?" "How much for the contract?" Ashton laughed. "It's not for sale, Mr. Murdoch. The girl has specific skills that make her quite valuable to my enterprise. I've invested considerable resources in acquiring her. No amount of money will— $1,000. The number fell like a stone. Ashton's expression flickered with surprise. "That's a substantial sum," he said carefully. $1,500 then." Hale's voice was flat, but Marin could hear the steel underneath. "That's my final offer. Take it or I burn your contract and you right along with it." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm making you a business proposition." "You said you're a businessman, so do business. $1,500 for a piece of paper, or you leave here with nothing but a story about how you got lost in the mountains." The threat hung in the cold air between them. Ashton's jaw tightened, and for a moment Marin thought he'd refuse, thought he'd call Hale's bluff. Then Ashton's expression shifted, calculating. 2,000. And I want it in writing that she can never claim any debt or obligation from me. Done. I'll need to see the money first. Wait here. Hale came back inside, his face grim. Marin was standing in the middle of the room, her arms wrapped around herself, shaking. "It's going to be okay," he said quietly. $2,000, Hale. "Where are you going to get—" "I have it." He moved to the loose floorboard in the corner, the one she'd never paid much attention to, and pried it up. Underneath was a metal box. He opened it to reveal stacks of bills, more money than Marin had ever seen in one place. "How do you have this much?" she whispered. "My father left it to me. I've been saving it for years, never knew what for." He pulled out the bills, counting quickly. "Guess I know now." "Hale, you can't. This is your whole life savings, your security. If something happens—" "Nothing's going to happen." He looked at her, his pale eyes fierce. "You're worth more than money, Marin. You and those girls. This is just paper. You're real." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't deserve this." "Yes, you do." He moved to her, cupping her face gently with his free hand. "You deserve safety. You deserve freedom. You deserve a life where nobody owns you, and I'm going to make damn sure you get it." He kissed her forehead, brief and tender, then went back outside. Marin watched through the window as money changed hands, as papers were signed and torn up and thrown into the snow. Ashton mounted his horse, counted the bills one more time, then rode off without looking back. When he disappeared into the trees, Marin's legs gave out and she sank to the floor. Hale came back inside to find her there, sobbing into her hands. He knelt beside her, pulling her against his chest. "It's over," he murmured. "He's gone. You're safe." "You gave up everything for me." "I gave up money. That's not everything." He held her tighter. "You're everything. You and Wren and Dawn. That's what matters." Marin cried until she had nothing left, her body shaking against his, and Hale held her through all of it, steady and solid and unbreakable. When the tears finally stopped, she pulled back to look at him. "What if more come?" she whispered. "What if there's another contract, another claim? Then I'll handle them too. All of them. Every single one." His voice was firm as bedrock. "Nobody's taking you away from here, Marin. I promise you that." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly. Outside, Wren called out, "Mama, come see my snow angel." Marin wiped her face, trying to pull herself together. Hale stood and offered his hand. "Come on," he said gently. "She's waiting." So Marin let him pull her up, let him guide her to the door, and stepped out into the cold sunshine where her daughter was waiting with a smile bright as stars. That night, after the children were asleep, Marin sat by the fire unable to settle. Her mind kept replaying Ashton's visit, the casual way he'd called her property, the certainty in his voice that he owned her. Even though Hale had sent him away, even though the contract was destroyed, she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. "You're thinking too loud," Hale said from his bedroll. "Sorry." "Don't apologize. Talk to me." Marin pulled her knees to her chest, staring into the flames. "What if I'm broken too badly to ever be whole?" "You're not broken." "I flinch every time you move too fast. I wake up panicking. I can't trust that this is real, that it won't all disappear." Her voice cracked. "The children deserve better than a mother who's falling apart." Hale sat up, his expression serious. "Those girls love you exactly as you are. They don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to be here." "What if being here isn't enough?" "It's more than enough." He moved to sit beside her, close but not touching. "You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see a woman who survived hell and came out still able to love, still able to hope. That's not broken, Marin. That's the strongest thing in the world." She turned to look at him, this quiet man who'd bought her freedom twice now, who asked for nothing and gave everything. "Why do you care so much?" "Because somewhere out there, my sister needed someone to care, and nobody did." His jaw tightened. "I can't save her, but I can save you. I can make sure you have the life she never got." "Is that all I am to you? A replacement for her?" "No." The word came out fierce. "You're Marin. You're the woman who holds those girls at night when they have nightmares. You're the one who sings while you make bread. You're the one who makes this cabin feel like home instead of just a place to sleep." He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. "You're the first person I've wanted to talk to in the morning in 8 years. That's got nothing to do with my sister." Marin's breath caught. "Hale, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I'm just telling you the truth. You matter, Marin. Not because of what you've survived or what you do, just because you're you." The fire crackled between them, sparks rising into the darkness. Marin felt something shift in her chest, something she'd been holding back for weeks now, maybe months. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of what?" "Of this. Of you. Of wanting something so badly it hurts." She looked at him fully. "I've never been allowed to want anything before. Every time I did, it got taken away. I'm not going anywhere. You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Hale reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused, steady. "I know you don't believe it yet, but I'll keep saying it until you do." Marin stared at their joined hands, at the way his fingers fit around hers like they belonged there. "What if I can't ever trust it completely?" "Then we work with that. We build something anyway." He squeezed gently. "You don't have to be healed to be loved, Marin. The words hit her like a physical blow, so unexpected and so needed that she couldn't speak. She just held onto his hand and let herself cry again, quieter this time, while the fire burned low and the children slept peacefully, and Hale stayed exactly where he was. 3 days later, Maureen woke burning with fever. It started as a headache, dull and persistent, then bloomed into full-body chills that left her shaking under every blanket in the cabin. By noon, she could barely stand. By evening, she was delirious, crying out for people who weren't there, thrashing in bed while her skin burned like fire. "Mama's sick," Wren whispered to Hale, her voice small and terrified. "Is she going to die like the bird?" "No," Hale said firmly, though his own fear was a living thing in his chest. "She's going to be fine. But I need you to be brave, okay? Can you help me take care of Dawn while I take care of Mama?" Wren nodded, her eyes huge. The next 2 days blurred into an endless cycle of cold cloths and herbs and prayers Hale hadn't said since his wife died. He forced water past Marin's cracked lips, bathed her fever-hot skin, held her when she thrashed, and called out names he didn't recognize. At night he tended to both girls alone, changing Dawn's swaddling cloths, feeding her goat's milk, reading stories to Wren in a voice that didn't shake no matter how scared he was. "Why isn't Mama waking up?" Wren asked on the second night, curled against Hale's side, while Dawn slept in her cradle. "She's fighting," Hale said quietly. "Her body's working hard to get better. We just have to wait." "What if she doesn't get better?" "She will." "But what if she doesn't?" Wren's voice was barely a whisper. "What happens to us?" Hale pulled her closer. "Then I take care of you anyway, both of you. That's not changing, Wren, no matter what." "Promise?" "I promise." Wren buried her face against his shoulder. "I'm scared, Papa." "Me too, little one. Me too." On the third morning, Marin's fever finally broke. Hale was dozing in the chair beside the bed, Dawn asleep in his arms, when he heard a soft sound. His eyes snapped open to find Marin looking at him, pale and weak, but awake. "Hey," she whispered, her voice like sandpaper. Relief hit him so hard he nearly sobbed. "Hey yourself." "How long?" 3 days. Marin's eyes widened. "The girls, are fine. They're both fine." He glanced down at Dawn, then across the room where Wren was still sleeping on her bedroll. "We managed." "You took care of them alone." "That's what family does." Marin's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry." "Don't." Hale shifted Dawn carefully, then reached out to touch Marin's cheek. "You have nothing to be sorry for. You were sick. It happens." "I heard you," she said quietly. "When I was fevered, I heard you reading to Wren, singing to Dawn, promising them you'd stay." Hale's throat tightened. "You weren't supposed to hear that." "I'm glad I did." She turned her face into his palm. "Papa stayed." The word hit him square in the chest. Wren's word for him, now Marin's too, and it meant more than he could articulate. "Yeah," he said roughly. Papa stayed. Behind them, Wren stirred and sat up, rubbing her eyes. When she saw Marin awake, her whole face lit up. "Mama!" She scrambled across the floor and climbed onto the bed, careful not to jostle. "You're awake! Papa said you would be, but I was scared you wouldn't, and I'm okay, sweetheart." Marin wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "I'm okay." Wren buried her face in Marin's shoulder, her small body shaking with relief. "Don't get sick again." "I'll try not to." Marin looked at Hale over Wren's head, her expression full of something he couldn't quite name. "We have a good papa, don't we?" Wren nodded vigorously. "The best papa." Hale had to look away, overwhelmed by the sudden rush of emotion. Dawn chose that moment to wake, making her hungry sounds, and he stood to fetch the goat's milk. "I can do it," Marin started to say, but Hale shook his head. "You rest. I've got her." He fed Dawn with practiced ease now, the movements automatic after 3 days of solo parenting. When he glanced back at the bed, he found Marin watching him with an expression so tender it made his chest ache. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. Just thank you." "Stop thanking me." "I'll thank you if I want to." A small smile tugged at her lips, the first he'd seen in days. You can't stop me, stubborn woman. You knew that when you bought me. The words were meant lightly, but they hung in the air awkwardly. Hale finished feeding Dawn and settled her back in the cradle before responding. I didn't buy you, he said quietly. I bought your freedom. There's a difference. I know. Marin's smile softened. I know that now. Recovery was slow. Marin's strength returned in increments, each day a little better than the last. Hale refused to let her do too much too soon, insisting she rest while he handled the heavier chores. Wren appointed herself nurse, bringing Marin water and telling her stories and generally being as helpful as a 3-year-old could be. You're good at this, Marin told Hale one afternoon, watching him expertly juggle Dawn on one hip while stirring soup with the other hand. Being a father, I'm making it up as I go. Aren't we all? She was sitting at the table now, strong enough to be upright but still pale. But you're good at it anyway. Hale shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. They're easy to love. So are you. The words came out quiet, almost accidental, and Marin immediately looked away, her cheeks flushing. Hale went very still, the spoon frozen mid-stir. Marin, forget I said that. She stood abruptly, swaying slightly. I need to lie down. Wait! He set Dawn in her cradle and crossed to Marin in 3 strides, catching her elbow gently. Don't run from this. I'm not running. I'm just tired. Marin. He waited until she met his eyes. I need you to hear something. Hale, don't. When my wife died, I thought that was it for me. Thought I'd live alone in the woods until I died too. I made peace with it. His voice was rough but steady. Then you showed up. You and these girls. And suddenly the cabin wasn't empty anymore. Suddenly I had a reason to get up in the morning beyond just going through the motions. Marin's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying you're easy to love too. He reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with infinite gentleness. I'm saying I don't want you here out of obligation or debt or because you have nowhere else to go. I want you here because you want to be here, because this is home, because we're building something real. I'm terrified, she whispered. Of what? Of wanting this too much, of believing it's real and then having it torn away. Tears spilled over. I can't survive losing this, Hale. I can't. Then don't lose it. He cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. Stay. Choose to stay, not because you're trapped or scared or grateful, but because you want to. What if I break? Then I'll help you put the pieces back together. His forehead touched hers. We'll help each other. That's what love is. Marin's eyes flew open. Love? Hale smiled faintly. Yeah, love. Is that okay? She stared at him, this man who'd saved her and sheltered her and never once demanded anything in return, and felt something crack open in her chest, not breaking, but blooming. Yes, she breathed. Yes, it's okay. He kissed her then, soft and careful and full of promise, and Marin kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Wren's voice piped up from across the room. Are you and Mama getting married now? They broke apart, laughing, and found Wren watching them with an expression of pure delight. Maybe, Hale said, glancing at Marin. Would that be okay with you? Yes, Wren bounced excitedly. Can I wear a pretty dress? We'll see. Marin was smiling so wide her face hurt. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But that night, after the children were asleep, Hale reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, an old iron ring, tarnished and simple, worn smooth with age. It was my father's, he said quietly, holding it out. Not an engagement ring exactly, more like a promise. If you want it. Marin looked at the ring, at his scarred hand holding it, at his face full of hope and fear and love. What kind of promise? That I stay, Hale said simply. No matter what, through good and bad, sickness and health, fear and joy. I stay. That's a wedding vow. Maybe. His lips quirked. Maybe I'm proposing, if that's okay. Marin's hands were shaking as she reached out and took the ring. It was too big for her finger, meant for a man's hand, but she slipped it on anyway and it felt right. "I stay too," she whispered. "That's my promise." Hale pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, and they stood there in the firelight while the wind howled outside, and the children slept peacefully, and everything felt, for the first time in Marin's life, completely and perfectly right. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the world covered in fresh snow that sparkled like diamonds. Marin woke with the ring still on her finger and smiled before she even opened her eyes. Wren noticed immediately at breakfast. "Mama, what's that?" "A promise ring," Marin said, holding it up to catch the light. "From Papa." "What does it promise?" "That we're family, always." "We're already family," Wren said matter-of-factly, then went back to her oatmeal. Hale caught Marin's eye across the table and she smiled back, and everything felt settled in a way she'd never experienced before. But that afternoon, everything shattered. They were in the yard, Wren playing in the snow while Marin hung laundry and Hale chopped wood, when Dawn started crying inside the cabin. Not her normal fussy cry, but something high and distressed that made Marin's blood run cold. She dropped the laundry and ran inside to find Dawn's face bright red, her breathing raspy and labored. "Hale!" The scream tore from her throat. "Hale!" He was there in seconds, and one look at Dawn told him everything. "Fever. Bad one." "No." Marin picked up her daughter with shaking hands. "No, no, no, she can't be sick. She's too small. She's only 4 months old. Marin, breathe!" Hale was already moving, grabbing herbs and cloth. "We caught it early. We can fight this." But Dawn got worse fast, her little body burning hot, her cries weakening to whimpers that were somehow worse. Marin held her constantly, rocking and praying and begging God or fate or anyone who would listen to spare her baby. Wren watched from the corner, silent and terrified, holding the wooden horse Hale had carved. "Is Dawn going to die?" she finally whispered. "No," Marin said fiercely, though terror was clawing at her throat. "She's going to be fine." But as night fell and Dawn's breathing grew more labored, Marin wasn't sure she believed it anymore. She looked at Hale with desperate eyes. "I can't lose her," she choked out. "I can't." "You won't," Hale's voice was firm. "I won't let that happen." He stayed up all night with them, applying cool cloths, forcing drops of medicine past Dawn's lips, holding Marin when she broke down sobbing. Wren eventually fell asleep, curled against his side, exhausted from worry. "Papa?" she mumbled once in her sleep. "I'm here," Hale whispered, stroking her hair. "Papa's here." And he was. Through the long, terrible night, through Marin's fear and Dawn's suffering and Wren's nightmares, he stayed, solid and steady and refusing to let any of them fall apart. When dawn finally came, gray and cold, Dawn's fever broke. Her breathing eased, her color improved, and she finally, blessedly, slept peacefully. Marin collapsed against Hale, sobbing with relief. "She's okay. She's okay." "Yeah." His voice was rough with exhaustion and emotion. "She is." Wren woke then, saw Dawn sleeping normally, and burst into tears. Hale gathered both girls into his arms, holding all 3 of them while they cried. "We're okay," he kept saying. "We're all okay." And they were. Battered and exhausted and still scared, but together, always together. The days following Dawn's recovery were quiet, almost too quiet, as if the whole world was holding its breath. Marin found herself watching her daughter obsessively, checking her breathing every few minutes, waking in the night to make sure she was still warm and pink and alive. The terror of nearly losing her had burrowed deep into Marin's bones, making everything feel fragile, breakable. She was washing dishes one morning when her hand started shaking so badly she dropped a cup. It shattered on the floor, pieces scattering across the worn wood like tiny, sharp stars, and something inside Marin shattered with it. "No," she gasped, dropping to her knees. "No, no, no." She tried to gather the pieces, cutting her palm on the sharp edge, blood welling bright red against her skin. The sight of it sent her spiraling further. "I broke it," she whispered, her voice rising with each word. "I broke it. I ruined everything. I can't keep anything safe. I couldn't save her. I almost lost her. I break everything I touch." "Marin." Hale was there, kneeling beside her, gently taking her bleeding hand. Stop. You're hurt. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. I'm going to break the girls too. I'm going to fail them. I can't do this. I can't. Look at me. His voice was firm but gentle, his hand steady on hers. You're not broken. You didn't break anything that matters. It's just a cup. It's not about the cup. The words tore from her throat, raw and desperate. It's about everything. I'm terrified all the time, Hale. Terrified that this will all disappear, that someone will come take them away, that I'll wake up and it'll all be gone. I can't breathe. I can't. She was sobbing now, great heaving gasps that shook her whole body. Hale pulled her against his chest, one hand in her hair, the other wrapped tight around her back. You're allowed to be scared, he murmured. After everything you've been through, you're allowed to fall apart sometimes. What if I can't put myself back together? Then I'll help. He pulled back enough to look at her, his pale eyes fierce and certain. Marin, you are the strongest person I've ever met. You survived being sold. You gave birth in chains. You took 2 broken children and gave them a home. A broken cup doesn't change any of that. I feel like I'm drowning. I know. He wiped her tears with his thumbs, careful of her cut hand. But you're not alone in the water. I'm right here. Wren appeared in the doorway then, her face worried. Mama, are you sad? Marin tried to pull herself together, to be strong for her daughter, but she couldn't stop crying. I'm okay, sweetheart. It's okay to be sad, Wren said solemnly, crossing the room to wrap her small arms around Marin's neck. When I'm sad, you hold me, so I'll hold you. The simple gesture broke something open in Marin's chest. She held Wren close, this child who'd been abandoned and hurt, but still knew how to comfort, and let herself cry until there was nothing left. When the storm finally passed, Hale cleaned and bandaged her hand while Wren swept up the broken cup with exaggerated care. Dawn gurgled happily from her cradle, oblivious to the emotional wreckage around her. I'm sorry, Marin said quietly, watching Hale wrap cloth around her palm, for falling apart like that. Don't apologize for being human. He tied off the bandage gently. You're carrying a lot, Marin. Sometimes it gets too heavy. That's okay. Is it, though? These girls need me to be strong. These girls need you to be real. Hale glanced at Wren, who was depositing the broken pieces carefully into the trash. They need to know it's okay to be scared sometimes, to ask for help. You're teaching them that right now. Marin looked at him, this man who'd seen her at her absolute lowest and never once looked away. How are you so patient with me? Because I know what it's like to be broken too. His expression was soft but sad. After my wife died, I spent 6 months sitting in this cabin staring at walls. Didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't do anything but exist. I was broken in a way I didn't think I'd come back from. What changed? Nothing dramatic. I just woke up one morning and thought, she wouldn't want me to live like this? So I got up, did the work, kept going. He squeezed her uninjured hand. Some days that's all you can do. Just keep going. And some days you need someone to help you. That's what I'm here for. I love you, Marin whispered, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I know I already said it with the ring, but I need you to hear it. I love you, Hale Murdoch. Not because you saved me or because I owe you. Just because you're you. His eyes softened, something vulnerable and raw crossing his features. I love you too. More than I thought I could love anyone again. They sat there on the floor surrounded by the ordinary chaos of their life, broken cups and bandages and children playing, and it felt sacred somehow. Real in a way nothing in Marin's life had ever been real before. That evening, after the children were asleep, Hale pulled out a small wooden box Marin had never seen before. Inside was a collection of items, a faded photograph of a young woman with kind eyes, a child's handkerchief embroidered with flowers, a lock of dark hair tied with string. My wife, Hale said quietly, touching the photograph. Emma, and our daughter Grace. She would have been 8 now. Marin looked at the photograph, at the woman's smile, and felt a surge of complex emotion, sadness for his loss, gratitude that he'd loved someone so deeply, and a strange kind of connection to this woman she'd never meet. She was beautiful. She was. Gentle, patient, good in ways I never was. Hale's voice was thick with old grief. I loved her completely. When she died, I thought that was it. Thought I'd used up all my capacity for love. But you didn't. No. He looked at Marin. Turns out the heart's got more room than you think. Doesn't mean I love Emma less. Just means there's space for you too. I'm not trying to replace her. I know, you couldn't if you tried. You're completely different people. He closed the box carefully. But that's good. I don't want a replacement. I want you, exactly as you are. Marin touched the ring on her finger, the one that had belonged to his father. Does it bother you, giving me this? Does it feel like you're betraying her memory? No. Hale's answer was immediate and certain. Emma would have liked you. She would have wanted me to find someone, to be happy again. His smile was sad but genuine. She was always better at forgiveness than I was, better at moving forward. I wish I could have known her. Me too. He put the box away carefully, then turned back to Marin. But I'm glad I know you. Glad you're here. Glad we're building this together. Even with all my broken pieces? Especially with them. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. The broken pieces are what make you strong. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm of healing and growing. Marin's hand mended, the cut fading to a pale pink line across her palm. Dawn grew stronger, her laugh becoming more frequent, her curiosity about the world expanding daily. Wren helped with chores with increasing competence, proud of every task she could accomplish. And slowly, carefully, Marin learned to trust the stability of it all. One afternoon in late November, she was folding laundry when Wren came running inside, her face flushed with excitement. Mama, Papa says we can go to town tomorrow for supplies and maybe peppermint sticks. Marin's stomach clenched. Town meant people. People meant questions. Questions meant danger. I don't know if that's a good idea, she said carefully. Wren's face fell. But Papa promised. I know, sweetheart. Let me talk to him. She found Hale in the barn mending a bridle. He looked up when she entered, immediately reading the tension in her posture. You don't want to go to town, he said flatly. It's not safe. Marin, we need supplies. Winter's coming and we're running low on flour, sugar, salt. Things I can't make or grow. Then you go. I'll stay here with the girls. For how long? His voice was gentle but firm. You can't hide forever. I'm not hiding. I'm being careful. You're being scared. He set down the bridle. And I understand why. But Marin, you're free now. Legally, completely free. You don't have to hide anymore. What if someone recognizes me? What if... Then I'll handle it. He crossed to her, taking her shoulders gently. I won't let anyone hurt you or take you. I promise you that. You can't promise that. Watch me. His jaw was set, his eyes fierce. You're my wife and everything but paperwork. Those girls are my daughters. Nobody touches my family. Nobody. The word wife sent a thrill through her, mixed with terror. Hale, come to town, he said quietly. Not because you have to, but because you deserve to walk freely, to buy peppermint sticks for your daughter, to live like a normal person instead of a fugitive. Marin wanted to argue, to list all the reasons it was dangerous, but she saw the logic in his words. More than that, she saw the hope in them, the belief that she could be more than her fear. Okay, she whispered. We'll go. Wren was overjoyed when she heard. She spent the evening planning what she'd look at in the general store, talking excitedly about town, even though she could barely remember ever being in one. Will there be other children? She asked at supper. Probably, Hale said. Can I play with them? We'll see. That night, Marin lay awake staring at the ceiling, her stomach in knots. Beside her, Wren and Dawn slept peacefully, trusting and safe. Across the room, Hale's steady breathing was a reassurance. Still awake? His voice came soft through the darkness. Can't sleep. Come here. Marin carefully extracted herself from between the girls and crossed to where Hale lay. He made room for her, pulling her against his chest, his arms solid around her. You're going to be fine, he murmured into her hair. How do you know? Because I won't let it be any other way. You can't control everything. No, but I can control how hard I fight for you. He kissed the top of her head. Sleep, Marin. I'll keep watch. And somehow, wrapped in his certainty, she finally did. The ride to town the next morning was beautiful, the landscape painted in autumn gold and evergreen. Wren sat between Marin and Hale on the wagon bench, pointing at everything. Hawks circling overhead, a deer watching from the tree line, frost sparkling on fence posts. Dawn was bundled against Marin's chest, sleeping peacefully despite the jostling. As they crested the final hill and the town came into view, Marin's anxiety spiked. It was small, maybe 24 buildings clustered around a main street, but it felt enormous, threatening. Easy, Hale murmured, sensing her tension. Just breathe. They pulled up in front of the general store, a weathered building with a painted sign and windows full of goods. Several other wagons were tied up outside, and Marin could hear voices inside, normal people doing normal things. Ready? Hale asked. Marin nodded, not trusting her voice. They went inside together, Wren holding Marin's hand, Dawn asleep in her arms. The store was warm and crowded, smelling of coffee and leather and sawdust. A few people glanced at them, but most were absorbed in their own business. The shopkeeper, a round man with kind eyes, smiled at them. Morning, Murdoch. Been a while. It has, Sam. Need to stock up for winter. Of course, of course. Sam's gaze moved to Marin and the children, curious but not unkind. And who's this lovely family? Marin's heart hammered. This was it. The moment someone would recognize her, would know. My wife, Marin, Hale said calmly, his hand warm on her lower back. And our daughters, Wren and Dawn. Wife, daughters, ours. The words settled over her like armor. Pleased to meet you, ma'am. Sam nodded respectfully. Beautiful children. Now, what can I get for you folks? And just like that, it was normal, safe, real. While Hale discussed supplies with Sam, Wren tugged on Marin's hand. Mama, can I look at the toys? Stay where I can see you, Marin said, her voice still tight. Wren wandered over to a shelf of carved animals and dolls, her eyes huge with wonder. Marin watched her, one hand on Dawn, the other ready to grab Wren and run if needed. She's a sweet girl, a woman's voice said beside her. Marin turned to find an older woman with silver hair and a warm smile examining fabric. Thank you, Marin managed. How old? 3, almost 4. Lovely age. I remember when mine were that small. The woman sighed nostalgically. Cherish it. They grow so fast. It was such a normal conversation, such an ordinary exchange, and yet it made Marin want to cry with relief. I will, she said softly. When they left the store an hour later, supplies loaded in the wagon and Wren clutching a peppermint stick in each hand, Marin felt lighter than she had in months. Nothing terrible had happened. No one had recognized her. No one had tried to take her. She was just a woman with her family, buying supplies in town. Normal. Free. See? Hale said quietly as they drove home. You did it. I was terrified the entire time. I know, but you did it anyway. That's courage, Marin. She leaned against his shoulder, watching Wren happily suck on her peppermint stick, and felt something shift inside her. A loosening. A beginning of belief. Maybe, just maybe, she really was free. That night, after the children were asleep, Marin sat at the table writing. Hale had bought her a journal in town, simple leather-bound paper, and she was filling the first page with careful words. What are you writing? He asked, coming to sit beside her. Things I want to remember. She showed him the page, November 23rd. We went to town. Wren got peppermint sticks. Dawn slept through everything. I was scared, but Hale was right. I'm free now. I need to start believing it. That's good, Hale said softly. Keep writing. Mark the days you want to keep, not just the ones you survived. There's a difference? Yeah. Surviving is getting through. Keeping is choosing to hold on to the good parts. He touched her hand, the one with the bandaged palm. You deserve to keep things now. Marin looked at him, at the cabin around them, at the children sleeping peacefully. I think I'm starting to understand that. Good. He stood, offering his hand. Come to bed. Tomorrow we start preparing for winter, together. together. The word had become her favorite. She took his hand and let him lead her to bed, and for the first time since the auction yard, Maren fell asleep without nightmares. Winter came hard that year, turning the world white and silent. Snow piled high against the cabin walls, and ice crusted the windows in delicate patterns. They stayed inside most days, keeping the fire burning hot, telling stories and playing games with Wren, while Dawn learned to sit up and babble. It was the happiest Maren had ever been. One evening, in December, Hale came inside from feeding the animals with snow clinging to his coat and a thoughtful expression on his face. "What?" Maren asked, looking up from where she was teaching Wren to sew. "Been thinking," he said, hanging up his coat, "about making this official." "Making what official?" "Us." He crossed to her, snowmelt still glistening in his hair. "Maren, I know I already gave you the ring, already said the words, but I want to make it legal. Want you to have my name officially. Want these girls to have it too." Maren's breath caught. "You want to marry me? Isn't that what we've been building toward? I didn't think you'd actually—" She couldn't finish the sentence, emotions tangling in her throat. "Why wouldn't I?" Hale knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. "You're already my wife in every way that matters. I just want the world to know it, too." "What about your wife, Emma?" "Emma's gone, and I loved her completely. But she's not coming back, and I can't spend the rest of my life mourning." His eyes were clear, certain. "I love you, Maren. I want to marry you, want to build a real future together. If you'll have me." Wren had stopped sewing to watch them, her eyes wide and delighted. Maren looked at this man who'd bought her freedom twice, who'd given her a home and children and hope, who'd loved her broken pieces without demanding she be whole. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Wren squealed with excitement, and Dawn, startled by the noise, began to cry. They all laughed, the moment dissolving into happy chaos as Hale pulled Maren into his arms and Wren danced around them singing about weddings. "When?" Maren asked, still wrapped in his embrace. "Spring," Hale said. "When the wildflowers bloom. We'll do it simple. Just us and the girls and maybe a preacher if we can find one willing to come out here." "I don't need a preacher." "No?" "No." Maren pulled back to look at him. "I just need you and these girls and a promise made in the open air where everyone can hear it. Then that's what we'll do." He kissed her forehead. "My wild, brave woman." "I'm not brave." "Yes, you are. You just don't see it yet." That night, lying in bed with Wren on one side and Dawn in her cradle beside them, Maren whispered into the darkness, "Are we really doing this?" "If you want to," Hale answered from his bedroll. "I do. I just can't quite believe it's real." "It's real." His voice was warm with certainty. "As real as anything I've ever known." Maren touched the ring on her finger, turning it slowly. "What if I'm not a good wife?" "You already are." "What if I fail? What if I can't be what you need?" "Maren." Hale sat up, his silhouette visible in the dim firelight. "I don't need you to be anything except yourself. That's always been enough." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I know you. I've seen you at your lowest and your highest. I've seen you scared and brave and angry and gentle, and I love all of it." He paused. "Do you love me?" "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. "Then that's all that matters. Everything else we'll figure out together." Together. That word again, solid as stone and warm as fire. "Okay," Maren whispered. "Then let's do it. Let's get married in the spring." "Promise?" "Promise." She heard him lie back down, heard his breathing settle into the rhythm of sleep. Beside her, Wren stirred and mumbled, "Pretty dress?" In her sleep. Maren smiled in the darkness, touching her daughter's hair gently. "Yes, sweetheart. You can have a pretty dress." And as snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the world in white silence, Maren let herself believe in something she'd never thought possible. A future built on choice and love and staying. A future that was finally, truly hers. Winter melted into early spring with a slowness that made Maren ache with anticipation. The snow retreated from the meadows, revealing tender green shoots pushing through the mud. Birds returned, filling the mornings with song, and the wildflowers began to bloom, first the white trilliums, then the yellow buttercups, and finally the purple lupines that carpeted the hillside behind the cabin in waves of color. Marin stood at the window one April morning, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold, and felt something she'd never experienced before: pure, uncomplicated happiness. Not the fragile kind that shattered at the first sign of trouble, but something deeper, rooted in the certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. "Mama, is today the wedding day?" Wren asked, appearing beside her with sleep-tousled hair. "Not yet, sweetheart. 2 more weeks." "That's forever," Wren groaned dramatically, making Marin smile. "It'll go fast. We still have lots to prepare." And they did. Hale had been working on building a small arbor from branches and wildflowers. Marin was sewing a simple dress for herself from fabric Hale had bought in town, pale blue cotton that reminded her of the sky on clear days. Wren had insisted on a dress too, and Marin had made her one from yellow fabric, bright as sunshine. "What about Dawn?" Wren asked, watching her baby sister crawl across the floor with determined focus. "She needs a pretty dress too." "She'll wear her white gown," Marin said, "the one we made for her." "And Papa? What will Papa wear?" "His best shirt and trousers, the ones without patches." Wren considered this seriously. "Will there be cake?" "I'll make one if I can figure out how." "Can I help?" "Of course!" Marin pulled Wren close, kissing the top of her head. "You're my best helper." Later that morning, while Hale was out checking the fences and Wren was occupied with drawing pictures, Marin sat at the table with Dawn in her lap and opened her journal. She'd been writing in it regularly now, marking the good days, the hard days, the ordinary days that felt extraordinary, simply because they were hers to choose. The latest entry read, April 8th, the lupines are blooming. Wren is counting down days to the wedding. Dawn said, "Mama," this morning, her first word. Hale fixed the loose board on the porch and carved me a new spoon to replace the one that broke. Everything is so ordinary and so perfect, I keep waiting for it to shatter. But maybe it won't. Maybe this is just what life looks like when you're free. She was about to write more when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Her whole body tensed automatically, that old fear surging up despite months of safety. She stood, holding Dawn close, and moved to the window. A stranger was dismounting, young, maybe 25, wearing travel-stained clothes and leading a horse that looked exhausted. But what caught Marin's attention was the bundle in the man's arms, wrapped in a tattered blanket. A baby. He was carrying a baby. Hale appeared from around the barn, rifle in hand but not raised. Marin watched as they spoke, saw Hale's expression shift from wary to shocked to something softer. Then both men turned toward the cabin, and Hale gestured for her to come out. Marin's heart pounded as she stepped onto the porch, Wren peering out from behind her legs. "Marin," Hale said carefully, "this is Daniel. He's got a situation." The young man looked exhausted and desperate, his eyes red-rimmed. "I'm sorry to intrude, ma'am. I heard in town that you and Mr. Murdoch take in children who need homes. Is that true?" Marin blinked. I don't know where you heard that." "The shopkeeper, Sam. He said you had 2 little ones that weren't born to you, said you gave them a good home when nobody else would." "We have 2 daughters," Marin said carefully, "but we didn't take them in. They're ours." "That's what I mean." Daniel shifted the bundle in his arms and Marin caught a glimpse of a tiny face, sleeping peacefully. "This is my daughter, Ivy. She's 2 weeks old. Her mama died giving birth and I can't take care of her. I'm heading west to find work in the goldfields. No place for a baby. I was going to leave her at the church, but then I heard about you, and I thought, maybe." His voice broke. Marin saw the anguish in his face, the way his arms tightened protectively around the baby, even as he offered to give her up. "You want us to take your daughter?" she asked quietly. "I want her to live." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I want her to have a mama and a papa and a real home. I can't give her any of that, but you can." Marin looked at Hale, who was watching her with that steady, patient expression that meant he'd support whatever she decided. Then she looked at the baby, so small and new and already motherless. "Come inside," she said. "Let's talk." They sat at the table while Daniel told his story, how he'd met Ivy's mother in a traveling show, how they'd fallen in love and planned to marry, how she'd died screaming his name while their daughter took her first breath, how he'd spent 2 weeks trying to care for Ivy alone and failing miserably, barely keeping her fed, watching her grow weaker despite his best efforts. "I'm killing her with my ignorance," he said flatly, "and I love her too much to let that happen. So I'm asking you, begging you, to take her, to give her the life I can't." Maren felt tears on her cheeks. She understood his desperation, his heartbreak, his impossible choice. She looked down at Ivy, this tiny girl with dark hair and rosebud lips, and felt something shift in her chest. "Can I hold her?" she asked. Daniel handed Ivy over carefully, as if she might break. Maren cradled her, feeling the baby's warmth, her fragile weight, the way she instinctively turned toward Maren's chest, seeking milk and comfort. "Hey, little one," Maren whispered. "You've had a hard start, haven't you?" Ivy made a small sound, not quite a cry, and Maren felt her heart crack open. Beside her, Wren had climbed onto a chair to peer at the baby, her eyes wide. "Is she staying?" Wren asked. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. She should stay. She needs a family." Out of the mouths of children. Maren looked at Hale, who came to stand beside her, looking down at Ivy with an unreadable expression. 3 children, he said quietly. "That's a lot." "I know." "We'd need to expand the cabin, build another room." "I know." "And we just got settled into a routine with these 2. "I know." Maren met his eyes. "But look at her, Hale. She needs us. So did you once. So did Wren. So did Dawn." His expression softened. "Seems like we're building a habit of taking in strays." "Is that a yes?" Hale reached out and touched Ivy's tiny hand. She gripped his finger immediately, holding tight with surprising strength. He smiled faintly. "Yeah, it's a yes." Daniel broke down crying, relief and grief warring on his face. "Thank you. God, thank you." "You're sure?" Maren asked him gently. "Once you leave, that's it. She's ours. You won't have any claim to her." "I know." He wiped his face roughly. "That's what I want. For her to have a real family, to not spend her life wondering why her daddy abandoned her." He stood, backing toward the door as if staying any longer would break his resolve. Tell her I loved her. Tell her I did this because I loved her." "We will," Maren promised. They watched him ride away, his shoulders shaking with sobs, and Maren held Ivy closer. The baby had woken now, looking around with unfocused eyes, her tiny mouth working. "She's hungry," Maren said. "Hale, we need goat's milk, and clean cloths, and I'll get everything." He kissed her forehead, then Ivy's. "Welcome home, little one." That night, after they'd fed Ivy and gotten her settled in a makeshift bed beside Dawn's cradle, after Wren had fallen asleep whispering excited plans about having 2 baby sisters, Maren sat with Hale by the dying fire. 3 children, she said wonderingly. "How did this happen?" "You opened your heart," Hale said simply, "and they came." Daniel called me Mama, to Ivy. He said, "This is your Mama now." "And is she?" "Yes." The word came out certain, fierce. "She's mine. They're all mine." "Ours," Hale corrected gently. "Ours," Maren agreed, leaning against his shoulder. "Hale, do you think we're crazy? Taking in a 3rd child 2 weeks before our wedding?" "Probably." He wrapped his arm around her. "But that's never stopped us before. What if I can't do this? What if 3 is too many?" "Then we'll figure it out, together." He kissed her hair. "You're already a wonderful mother, Maren. 1 more won't change that. I was property 18 months ago, sold like cattle. And now I'm a mother of 3 about to get married." She shook her head in disbelief. "Sometimes I can't reconcile who I was with who I am now." "That's because you're not the same person anymore." Hale pulled back to look at her. "You've grown, changed, healed. The woman in that auction yard was surviving. The woman sitting here now is living. There's a difference." Because of you. No, because of you. I just gave you the space to become yourself. Marin looked at this man who'd seen her at her absolute lowest and loved her anyway, who'd bought her freedom and never demanded payment, who'd built a family with her from broken pieces. I love you, she said, more than I have words for. I love you too. He stood, offering his hand. Come to bed. Tomorrow we start preparing for a wedding and learning how to care for a newborn. We'll need our rest. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity and adjustment. Ivy proved to be a fussy baby, crying frequently and struggling to keep down the goat's milk. Marin spent long nights walking the floor with her, singing soft songs and praying she was doing it right. Dawn, newly mobile and jealous of the attention, became clingy and demanding. Wren tried to help, but mostly created more work by insisting on holding Ivy constantly. I'm drowning, Marin admitted to Hale one exhausted morning. The wedding is in 4 days and I haven't finished my dress, and Ivy won't stop crying, and Dawn is teething, and Wren spilled flour all over the kitchen, and I don't know how to do this. Hale took Ivy from her arms, settled her against his chest with practiced ease, and said, Then we postpone the wedding. What? No. Why not? We're already living as husband and wife. A few more weeks won't change anything. But Wren's been so excited, and the wildflowers will fade, and none of it matters as much as you being ready. He bounced Ivy gently, and she quieted, mesmerized by his deep voice. Marin, we can get married any time. There's no rush. There is, though. She sat down heavily at the table, exhaustion pulling at every muscle. I need to know it's real, that this is permanent. I need the words said out loud where God and everyone can hear them. I need... She stopped, throat closing up with emotion. You need what? Hale asked gently. I need to not be property anymore. I need a name that's mine because I chose it, not because someone bought me and gave it to me. Tears spilled over. I need to be Marin Murdoch, legally, really, so nobody can ever take it away. Understanding dawned in Hale's eyes. Then we don't postpone. We just simplify. Forget the arbor and the cake and all the extra. We'll say the words that matter, and that's enough. But Wren wants you happy, that's all. He shifted Ivy to one arm and reached out to cup Marin's face with his free hand. 4 days from now, in whatever state we're in, we're getting married, even if Ivy's screaming and Dawn's crying and Wren's covered in mud. We'll say the words and mean them, and that's all that matters. Marin leaned into his touch, letting his certainty anchor her. Promise? Promise. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and warm, the kind of perfect spring day that felt like a gift. Marin woke early, her stomach fluttering with nerves and anticipation. Beside her, Wren was already awake, practically vibrating with excitement. Is it today? Is it really today? It's really today, sweetheart, Wren squealed and launched herself at Marin, hugging her tight. In her cradle, Dawn stirred and babbled, and from the makeshift bed beside her, Ivy let out a lusty cry announcing she was awake and hungry. All right, girls, Marin said, laughing despite her exhaustion. Let's get this day started. They spent the morning in organized chaos, bathing children, dressing them in their carefully made dresses, trying to keep them clean while Marin finished getting herself ready. Hale had tactfully disappeared to the barn, giving her space, though she could hear him whistling while he worked. When she finally pulled on her blue dress and looked at herself in the small mirror, Marin barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked healthy, happy, loved. The hollow-eyed girl from the auction yard was gone, replaced by someone stronger. Someone who'd survived and grown and chosen to love despite everything that tried to break her. You look beautiful, Mama, Wren breathed, appearing beside her. Like a princess. Thank you, sweetheart. Marin knelt down, adjusting Wren's yellow dress. You look beautiful, too. And Dawn? And Ivy? Marin glanced at her youngest daughters, both dressed in white and looking angelic despite Dawn's tendency to drool and Ivy's constant fussing. Everyone looks perfect. Is it time? Almost. Let me just... A knock on the door interrupted her. Marin opened it to find Hale standing there in his best shirt and trousers, his hair still damp from washing and her breath caught. He looked handsome in a rough, weathered way that made her heart skip. You ready? He asked, his voice soft. Yes. She picked up Dawn, while Wren took Ivy in her arms with careful concentration. Let's do this. They walked together to the meadow behind the cabin, where the wildflowers grew thick and fragrant. Hale had managed to finish the arbor after all, a simple arch of woven branches decorated with lupines and buttercups that swayed gently in the breeze. No guests, no preacher, no audience except the mountains and sky, and 3 little girls who were their whole world. Hale took Marin's free hand, and they stood facing each other while Wren carefully set Ivy down on a blanket in the shade. I don't have fancy words, Hale started, his voice rough with emotion. Never been good at speeches, but I know what I want to say. He squeezed her hand. Marin Dale, you came into my life in chains and somehow set me free. You taught me that love isn't about possession or control. It's about choosing someone every single day and building something real together. You're brave and fierce and broken and beautiful, and I love every part of you. I promise to stay, through good times and bad, through fear and joy, through crying babies and hard winters and whatever else comes. I stay. That's my vow. Marin was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. Hale Murdoch, she managed through her tears. You bought my freedom when I had none. You gave me a home when I was homeless. You loved me when I was unlovable. You taught me that I'm worth more than a price tag, more than what was done to me, more than my worst days. You gave me these beautiful girls and this life I never thought I deserved, and I promise to choose you back, every day, even when I'm scared, even when I'm broken. I promise to build this life with you and trust that it's real. I stay too. That's my vow. Hale pulled her close, and they kissed while Wren cheered and Dawn clapped her chubby hands, and Ivy, for once, stayed blessedly quiet. When they broke apart, both laughing and crying, Marin felt something settle deep in her chest, a sense of rightness, of home. Are we married now? Wren asked. Yes, sweetheart, Marin said. We're married now. So we're really a family? We've always been a family, Hale said, scooping Wren up with one arm while keeping the other around Marin. But now it's official. They spent the afternoon celebrating simply, eating the slightly lopsided cake Marin had managed to bake, picking wildflowers until their arms were full, lying in the meadow watching clouds drift by while the girls played around them. It was ordinary and extraordinary all at once, perfect in its imperfection. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, they walked back to the cabin together. Wren skipped ahead, making up songs about weddings. Dawn dozed in Hale's arms. Ivy was quiet against Marin's chest, finally content. Happy? Hale asked quietly. More than I ever thought possible, Marin answered truthfully. You? Yeah. He smiled, that rare soft smile she'd learned to treasure. Yeah, I am. That night, after the children were finally asleep and the cabin was quiet, Marin sat at the table with her journal while Hale banked the fire. She wrote, Today I married Hale Murdoch. I am Marin Murdoch now. Not by force, not by sale, but by choice. I have 3 daughters who call me Mama. I have a husband who loves my broken pieces. I have a home that's mine. I was once priced before I held my first child. Now I hold 3, never meant to be sold, only saved. This is my life, the one I chose, the one I'll keep choosing every single day. She was closing the journal when she heard a sound outside. Soft, almost imperceptible. A baby crying. Distant. Marin's heart stopped. She looked at Hale, who'd heard it too, his expression alert. They moved to the door together, opening it cautiously. On the porch, wrapped in a tattered shawl, was a newborn baby. A girl, maybe a few days old, with a note pinned to her blanket. Marin's hand shook as she picked up the baby, who immediately quieted in her arms. Hale unpinned the note and read it aloud by lamplight. Forgive me. I can't keep her. Please give her the love I can't. Her name should be Ivy. The note's wrong, Marin said immediately, looking down at the tiny face. Her name is Ivy, but we already have an Ivy. So we name her something else, Hale said practically. Marin thought about the baby in her arms, left on their doorstep because someone, somewhere, had heard that this was a place where broken things could be mended, a place where children found homes, a place where love grew even in the darkest soil. Ivy, she said softly, testing the name. But a different kind, Something that means growing where nothing should grow. Something about resilience. Like what? Marin looked up at the vines growing over the cabin porch, twisted and tough and somehow beautiful despite the harsh conditions. Ivy, she said. Just Ivy. Let her name mean what she becomes, not where she came from. Hale smiled. Ivy it is. They brought the baby inside, adding a fourth cradle to the increasingly crowded cabin. As Marin cleaned and fed the newest member of their family, she felt something profound settle over her. This was who they were now. The people who took in the broken ones, who said yes when the world said no, who built family not from blood, but from choice. 4 daughters, Hale said wonderingly, standing behind Marin as she rocked the new Ivy. We're officially insane. Probably. Marin leaned back against him. But it's a good kind of insane. You sure about this? We just got married this morning, and now we have a 4th child. I'm sure. She looked around at the 4 sleeping girls, Wren, Dawn, the first Ivy, and now this new Ivy. I'm building something here. Something that can't be bought or sold or taken away. A family made of choice and staying. And if more broken children show up on our doorstep, I'll say yes to them too. Even if we have to build an extension onto the cabin? Even then? Hale kissed the top of her head. Then I guess I better start cutting timber. The next morning, Marin woke to chaos. 4 children at various stages of waking and wanting, all needing attention simultaneously. Instead of overwhelming her, it made her laugh. This was her life now. Loud, messy, exhausting, and absolutely perfect. Over breakfast, while Hale juggled feeding the 2 Ivies and Marin helped Wren with her porridge and Dawn made a mess of everything, Wren asked, Mama, why do people keep leaving babies on our porch? It was such a simple, innocent question, but it made Marin pause. She thought about the answer, about what she wanted her daughters to understand about the world and their place in it. Because, she said carefully, sometimes people know they can't take care of their babies the way they deserve, and instead of letting them suffer, they bring them to people who can love them. That's not giving up. That's giving them a chance. Like my first mama did? Wren's voice was small. Exactly like that. Your first mama loved you enough to want you to be safe, even if that meant giving you to someone else. That's brave. Am I brave? The bravest, Marin said, pulling her close. All of you girls are. You survived things that would break most people, and you're here, living and laughing and growing. That's the bravest thing in the world. Wren considered this seriously, then nodded. Good, because I want to help when more babies come. More babies? Hale looked alarmed. How many do you think we're getting? All of them that need us, Wren said matter-of-factly, making Marin laugh despite herself. Let's start with these 4, Marin suggested, and see how we manage. But even as she said it, she knew Wren was probably right. This cabin had become a sanctuary somehow, a place where the broken could be mended and the lost could be found. And as long as she and Hale had breath in their bodies and love in their hearts, they'd keep opening the door. Weeks turned into months, spring melting into summer. The cabin expanded as Hale built an additional room, creating more space for their growing family. The 4 girls thrived, Wren growing tall and confident, Dawn learning to walk and babble in full sentences, the 2 Ivies filling out and becoming healthy under Marin's constant care. Marin learned to distinguish between the Ivies by calling the older one Ivy Rose and the younger Ivy May, giving them each their own identity while honoring the names they'd been given. It worked well, and both girls responded to their full names with delighted giggles. One evening in late June, as Marin sat on the porch watching the sunset while Hale rocked Ivy May and the other girls played in the yard, she felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. This was home. Real, permanent, chosen home. What are you thinking about? Hale asked, noticing her expression. Everything. Nothing. She smiled. Mostly about how different life is now compared to a year ago. Different how? A year ago, I was still flinching every time you moved, still waiting for everything to disappear, still convinced I didn't deserve any of this. She gestured to the girls, the cabin, the life they'd built. Now I'm finally starting to believe it's real, that I get to keep it. You do get to keep it, Hale said firmly. All of it. Forever. Forever is a long time. Not long enough. He shifted Ivy Mae to one arm and reached for Marin's hand with the other. I'm planning on forever with you. Hope that's okay. Marin squeezed his hand, her heart full. More than okay. That night, after the children were finally asleep, a process that took increasingly longer with 4 little ones, Marin opened her journal and wrote her final entry. June 28th. 1 year since everything changed. 1 year since Hale bought my freedom. 6 months since Wren arrived. 4 months since Dawn got her name. 2 months since we married. 8 weeks since Ivy Rose joined us. 6 weeks since Ivy Mae appeared. I've spent so much of my life surviving, I forgot what it feels like to actually live. But I'm learning. Every day I'm learning. I have a husband who chose me, 4 daughters who trust me, a home that's mine. Not bought, not stolen, not temporary. Mine. I was once priced before I held my first child. Now I hold 4, never meant to be sold, only saved. This is the life I chose, and I choose it again tomorrow, and every day after that. This is home. This is love. This is what freedom feels like, and it's worth everything. She closed the journal, set it aside, and climbed into bed beside Hale. He wrapped his arm around her automatically, pulling her close, and she fit against him perfectly, like she'd been made to be there. Love you, he mumbled sleepily. Love you too, she whispered back. And as she drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the soft sounds of her children breathing and her husband's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, Marindale Murdoch knew with absolute certainty that she was finally, truly free. Not because someone had bought her freedom, though Hale had done that twice. Not because she'd escaped or run or fought her way out, but because she'd chosen to believe in something better than survival. She'd chosen to trust, to love, to build a life from broken pieces. She'd chosen to stay when everything in her screamed to run. She'd chosen to become someone new, not forgetting who she'd been, but growing beyond it. She was no longer the girl sold at auction. She was Marin Murdoch, wife, mother, survivor, warrior. And this life, loud, messy, imperfect, and absolutely beautiful, was entirely, completely, perfectly hers. The end.